Ever wondered how Kathleen Kennedy went from being one of the most respected figures in Hollywood to a target for millions of Star Wars fans? Today we're breaking down how YouTube critics like Critical Drinker and others have held her responsible for Star Wars' perceived downfall and why their voices matter more than ever. From the YouTube algorithm that's turned her into a household name for all the wrong reasons, to the infamous fan backlash that seems to follow every new Star Wars release, there's a lot to unpack here. Is this just the nature of online commentary, or is there a deeper truth to the claims against her leadership? Stick around to see how critics' voices became the nail in the coffin for Kathleen Kennedy's reputation within the Star Wars fandom. It's hard to ignore how Kathleen Kennedy's time leading Lucasfilm has been rough. Many Star Wars projects have turned out disappointing in the eyes of fans. These releases seem to miss the mark one after another, driving away loyal supporters and stirring up criticism that's only grown louder online. While there have been a few notable successes, they're few and far between. These scattered wins haven't been enough to shake the questions surrounding her leadership as Lucasfilm's president. This wave of skepticism hasn't been confined to just a few disgruntled fans either. Critics and movie commentators on YouTube like Star Wars Theory and Critical Drinker have brought these concerns to a massive audience, racking up millions of views every month. As a result, it seems that Kathleen Kennedy's days as Lucasfilm's head might be numbered, especially since she's reportedly hinted at stepping down herself. In today's video, we'll dive into 4 main ways that YouTube critics have played a significant role in tarnishing Kathleen Kennedy's reputation. Let's begin with one of the most influential aspects of this movement, the YouTube algorithm. As it has evolved, the algorithm has helped criticism and commentary channels skyrocket in popularity, giving everyday viewers direct insight into the issues within Hollywood. Commentary on Star Wars has become a staple of online culture. This shift means that even casual viewers who aren't diehard Star Wars fans are now more exposed to the franchise's perceived issues and the details surrounding them, instead of merely hearing Rise of Skywalker was a bad movie. Viewers are seeing Kathleen Kennedy's name directly associated with these so-called failures. This is something that wasn't happening 5 or 6 years ago. The rise of popular YouTube critics has had a lasting impact on Kathleen Kennedy's reputation among Star Wars fans and the general public. Today, many people see her as directly responsible for any Star Wars release, good or bad. This means that when a Star Wars movie disappoints, viewers no longer just blame the movie, they point to Kathleen Kennedy herself as the reason behind the perceived failure. This shift has turned Kennedy into a face of the franchise in a way few studio heads have ever experienced. If we look back even just a decade, the average viewer might have dismissed a film like Batman vs. Superman as a misstep by the director or screenwriters without considering the studio head, Kevin Tsujihara, behind it. The focus was on the film itself, not the higher-ups at the studio, but now YouTube commentators frequently bring up Kathleen Kennedy's influence, scrutinizing not only the projects she oversees, but also the public statements she makes. For example, Kennedy once remarked that women in leadership face a harder time with fan criticism, which sparked a huge wave of debate and backlash online. Some fans felt she was accusing them of having prejudices simply because they didn't enjoy a particular Star Wars film or series. This fueled the perception of her as disconnected from the fanbase. Whatever people's opinions on the comment itself, this statement, which might have flown under the radar without YouTube critics highlighting it, added to the skepticism surrounding her leadership. Now, Kathleen Kennedy has become almost inseparable from the Star Wars brand, almost as iconic as Luke Skywalker himself, though maybe not quite that far. Yet, compared to just a few years ago, more people now know her name and have formed opinions about her than ever before. This massive surge in public awareness has changed the narrative around both her and the franchise. The second major factor here is what can only be described as a failure to recognize the influence of online fandom. Early in the rise of YouTube movie critics and online fan communities, it seemed that Kathleen Kennedy and the broader Hollywood elite underestimated just how powerful and far-reaching these platforms had become. They dismissed fan feedback as if it were a niche concern, not realizing that these YouTube reviewers had grown into voices that many everyday viewers turned to for insights. By ignoring the perspectives and requests of these dedicated fans, Lucasfilm's leadership missed out on valuable insights from a core segment of their audience. As a result, when these YouTube channels continued to expand to reach new viewers, the Star Wars franchise started to suffer. Ratings fell, viewership decreased, and public perception shifted as fans felt unheard and undervalued. This wasn't merely a coincidence, it was the result of underestimating the significant sway that these online communities held. A smarter approach would have involved engaging with fan feedback and addressing key criticisms constructively, especially since many fans' insights reflected those of the broader target audience. However, by continuing to dismiss fan voices, Star Wars repeatedly made choices that alienated longtime supporters, eroding their faith in the franchise. A prime example of this misstep is The Acolyte. This show, according to fans and critics, seemed to embody every miscalculation Star Wars had made over the past decade, combining them into one series that ultimately became a massive disappointment. The Acolyte reinforced to fans that their voices weren't being considered, causing a further divide between the creators and the audience. This brings us to the third reason, an emotional response from Lucasfilm's leadership to online criticism. Kathleen Kennedy and her team did take action in response to backlash, but rather than addressing valid critiques from devoted fans, their focus seemed to be on countering the most extreme criticisms. By concentrating on what they perceived as the loudest voices rather than the most constructive, they only served to alienate fans further, failing to resolve the underlying issues that most concerned the audience. Lucasfilm's reaction to fan backlash took a troubling turn by often focusing on the most extreme, negative voices rather than addressing the genuine concerns held by the majority of fans. When Kathleen Kennedy's team responded, they frequently targeted the loudest outliers, the so-called lunatics, who were unnecessarily hostile while failing to recognize the valid criticisms about storytelling and execution that most fans raised. This approach only fueled frustration among the wider fan base, many of whom simply wanted to see better narratives and character development in Star Wars. Instead, by zeroing in on the most inflammatory voices, Lucasfilm seemed to dismiss all criticism as narrow-minded or bigoted rather than accepting the constructive input from dedicated fans who cared deeply about the quality of the franchise. The repeated lack of acknowledgement for story-centered critiques created a rift between fans and Lucasfilm, essentially turning it into a standoff. Fans felt their perspectives were being ignored or unfairly categorized, while Lucasfilm doubled down on defending its creative decisions. However, in this battle between Lucasfilm and its fans, there was only ever one side that could truly win: the fans, who ultimately decide whether to support the franchise financially or not. When this tension escalated, it hurt Star Wars on multiple fronts. Lucasfilm's billion-dollar ventures, such as the highly ambitious Star Wars Hotel, became high-profile failures, with the hotel closing within just a year due to lack of interest and support. These financial losses weren't a coincidence. They stemmed directly from fans' frustration with how their feedback was handled and their dissatisfaction with recent projects. Finally, the fourth reason this shift against Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm has become so intense is the nature of YouTube criticism itself. Unlike legacy media outlets, YouTubers are known for their candid and sometimes ruthless commentary. These creators are willing to dig deep, pointing out flaws in a way that traditional media often avoids. They speak directly to audiences without the constraints of studio loyalty or PR language, which resonates with fans who are equally frustrated. YouTubers' frustration with Star Wars and Lucasfilm has escalated to a point where many feel compelled to push back, voicing their discontent with the franchise's current direction under Kathleen Kennedy. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment backlash. It emerged as a response to years of decisions and statements from Kennedy and her team that critics believe showed a disregard for fan feedback. As these YouTubers continued to speak out, they built momentum that has left a lasting impact on Kennedy's legacy, with criticism so persistent and widespread that it's become nearly impossible for her to redeem herself in the eyes of the public. This extensive criticism has cemented her reputation in such a way that for as long as she remains in her position, countless fans and critics will view her leadership as a major reason for the franchise's missteps. Though some may see this criticism as harsh, the sheer volume of commentary across YouTube has undeniably shaped the narrative around Star Wars. YouTube critics now wield immense influence over how fans perceive the franchise, sometimes serving as the dominant voice shaping public perception. Even if some criticisms are subjective, they still reflect a vocal segment of the fan base, further influencing Star Wars' cultural standing. What do you think of Kathleen Kennedy's influence on Star Wars and the response from YouTube critics? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more insights and analyses.